Um, Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Mayor's Commission for Citizens with Mayor's Commission for Citizens with Disabilities for the City of Omaha. I want to welcome our television audience, our guests, members, and our interpreter. Um, uh, it's my great hope that we will see this rebroadcast on Channel 22 of Cox. We're still working on this, so you might be watching this on a YouTube channel, and that's okay too. Um, I do want to let you know that these uh, videos of the Mayor's Commission meetings will be stored on the Commission website at www.cityofomaha.org. Click on the Mayor's office and then click on the Disabilities Commission. Um, I want to quickly run through kind of our purpose, which we were talking about a little bit before the meeting, but irrespective of that. Um, our main objective is to promote quality of life, accessibility, and equity in all aspects related to the City of Omaha on behalf of and in cooperation with the citizens of Omaha who experience disabilities and their families. To this end, we advise the mayor, the city council, city department heads, and other City of Omaha personnel on issues of access, representation, employment, housing, and quality of life as it affects individuals with disabilities and their respective families in the city. We try to serve as a resource for Omaha citizens with disabilities and their families in terms of their concerns and resolutions regarding issues affecting them, which use up all of our time before our meeting. So we're on it, to say the least. We also work to publicize the commission as a resource that persons with disabilities, as well as employers, housing representatives, business owners, engineers and architects, and others who have a role in bettering the lives of Omaha citizens with disabilities. We work to promote awareness to the general public on the capabilities, needs, and desires of people with disabilities. We publicly recognize the efforts of employers, businesses, schools, organizations, and others who've demonstrated outstanding support of programs and services for our citizens with disabilities. We work to advocate for accessibility issues and implement plans and projects to improve services. And we review and implement plans and projects for advocating for services for citizens with disabilities in Omaha. I want to remind you to have a paper and pen handy to take notes. We will be making some announcements before the end of the meeting. Um, uh, I want to take a second and have the members introduce themselves. I think I forgot to do that last time. I'm Mark Smith. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Nebraska Medical Center's Monroe-Meyer Institute, which is the University Center on Disabilities for the state of Nebraska, and I serve as chair. To my right.
I'm Megan Walls. My company is Assistology, where I do training and consulting around inclusion, accessibility, and universal design. So I try to represent the interests of the greater disability community.
Thanks, Megan. And Ms. Floro?
And my name's Nancy Flurl, and I'm with the Nebraska Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. We're the vocational rehabilitation agency that serves individuals that are visually impaired, blind, and deafblind.
Thanks, Nancy.
I'm Reverend Dr. Lisa Sherman. I'm a pastor here in Omaha. I also serve on the State of Nebraska Emergency Management Advisory Council, as well as the CISM team, the Critical Incident Rapid Response team for the state of Nebraska. And I have 5 amazing children with a wide variety of disabilities.
Thanks, Lisa. And Rachel?
Yes, hello, I'm Rachel Johnson. I work for the state of Nebraska as a service coordinator to ensure that needs are met for folks with developmental disabilities. I also happen to live with a spinal cord injury, so I like to speak on the advocate for the needs of those populations.
Thanks, Rachel. And I should mention, I always leave this off. Number one, the Monroe-Meyer Institute covers a lot of disability issues across the lifespan, but primarily pediatric but the program that I work for really is all about individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And then I'm also a parent of a young man with disabilities and sibling to a younger sister with disabilities. So uh, disability has been part of my life for a while. Um, let's see. Thank you. Uh, we did check to see if we had a quorum today. We don't, so we didn't approve minutes or our agenda, but given that we've been doing this for a while with the COVID pandemic, we just kind of forge ahead and do our work anyway. Um, so uh, a lot of our discussion beforehand was related to some issues of accessibility within the community that we're going to be working on over the next month. Um, Nancy and Megan and are taking a big role in that, and I appreciate that very much. Also, we'll be sending to the mayor in the next while a kind of state of the year last year for the mayor's commission and highlight some of the activities and accomplishments of the commission. Okay, and with that, I'd like to turn the discussion over to um, our representatives from MECA. I never remember what MECA stands for, so I'll leave that to you all because I'm sure you do remember. Um, to talk about some of the really awesome work that's gone on over the last, gosh, couple of years in terms of the upgrades to the Jean Leahy Mall, the Heartland of America Park, and the Lewis and Clark Landing, basically the riverfront revitalization. Um, we did send some questions ahead of time, so they've got those. But our hope was to have a discussion about the accessibility and kind of what went on in terms of accessibility for people with disabilities in these new projects. And I should remark too that we did talk with MECA representative much earlier on in the process and kind of expressed some opinions and concerns, but I think we had a really good discussion, and so now that things are at the point of opening up, it just seemed like a good time to have to continue that discussion. So I'll turn it over to. I see there's several people on the line, so I'll turn it over to you.
Great, wonderful. And I'll jump in first. Hi, I was the one that had been emailing with Catherine and was one half of the presentation that we gave. I think, yeah, it's been maybe a year or so ago. But
Right.
As a reminder, I'm Christina Engdahl. I'm the Director of Communications for MECA, which stands for Metropolitan Entertainment and Convention Authority. It's a mouthful, but it rolls off your tongue and into your heart. So yeah, we've been very excited to be a part of the Riverfront Project since its inception. And it's been really wonderful to see all these kind of great ideas come to life. And we're very excited to be here with you today to talk about all the ways that we've considered accessibility and to give you a really thorough overview of what's to come. Katie Bassett, who's also with us today, she's our Vice President of Parks, and she is all things riverfront. I usually, when I get a question, Katie always knows the answer, so she's a really wonderful resource. And then we also have Nathan Elliott here with us too from OJB Landscape Architecture, really the brains behind the design of the riverfront. And he is a really great resource for the questions that you had. And so I think what we'd like to do today is to hop into it's kind of informal, but a presentation that Nathan put together with some kind of oversight of layout of park design, as well as some renders that I know that you mentioned that you all hope to see here today. So anything else for Katie that I'm missing that you, nope?
No, but it does sound like the pressure's on there, Katie, so boy.
No, thank you very much for this opportunity again. It has been a little while since Christina and I had the opportunity to get in front of you, and we're excited to kind of circle back, talk about this again. I can't say enough, Nathan is really, the brains behind the landscape architect firm that has really helped ensure that we have great access throughout the park and are really building this as a park for everyone. So with that, I'll kind of kick it over to Nathan. I am sure he will be sharing his screen.
Yeah. Speaking of no pressure, and that's Nathan's cue. Yeah.
Welcome. We're really happy you're here.
Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Well, we're excited to be here. Look forward to speaking with you today. If I get my computer to cooperate, here we go. All right, so what I've got a high-level presentation of the riverfront, including plans and some perspective renderings, along with a little bit of kind of construction progress shot, just so you understand where we are in the process. And my thinking is that I will walk you through the plans, kind of get you generally familiar with the areas of the project, and then what I'll do is I'll then use the renderings to kind of speak to some of the individual solutions that we've come up with that integrate access for Omahans, but all abilities to use the park. And our firm has been practicing, we're about 32 years old. For the last 15 years, I've been working on public open space design. So I travel to no communities quite like Omaha, but I travel to a number of other American cities, and we implement these kinds of projects across the country. So typically our approach is one of flexibility and as universal access as we can make for a project. So hopefully those things will come through in the presentation today. And then I have a hard stop at what will be 4:15 Central. I think that's been communicated, but what I'm going to try to do is move swiftly and concisely through the presentation. So there is a little bit of time at the end for you to ask some questions. I know there's an opportunity for overflow. We can address some of these things as a follow-up, but I'd like to try to cover as much as we can today in the process. So the riverfront, is three components. There's Jean Leahy Mall, which is sort of the western and kind of most downtown adjacent one. It's designed as more of a kind of urban park. Heartland of America Park, which is really fronting on the river south of 480. It changes in scale and becomes a little bit more of, say, kind of a festival large gathering space as opposed to the kind of more intimate scale of Jean Leahy Mall. And then Lewis and Clark Landing, which slips under 480 and adjacent to Riverfront Drive. And this is going to have kind of the Science and Technology Education Center, as well as a destination playground, sort of an identity all to its own. Lots of folks have been involved in the design of this project, countless consultants, as well as a number of folks from the Omaha community that have helped guide us along the way. And really, I'm not going to read these to you, but we took the connect to the riverfront pretty seriously, trying to make sure that, again, this is something that's welcome and there's things that attract really everybody, no matter what you're into or what you're able to do, that this is a place where you can come and gather. Let's see, get through here. So I'm going to start with Jean Leahy Mall. And I will say of all the three sites, Jean Leahy Mall is probably the most complicated physically in terms of its constraints. Basically from this lower left corner here to the upper right corner here, there's about 22 feet of vertical change across the park, and that includes lower levels for the greenhouse apartments, multiple levels for the 9th and Farnham parking garage. So navigating just pure physical access for the mobility impaired was really a focus, but I think you'll see there's elements of accessibility woven throughout the entire project. I'll start on the western side, basically from 13th to 11th is sort of, that's the area that's been filled. If you knew the mall before, if you didn't, I have a photo at the end, I'll show you where we started. But this was a kind of depression with the pond in the center. We've brought in a tremendous amount of earth to fill that area and create a kind of a level lawn that organizes this performance pavilion and what we're calling the downtown green. That's capped by a plaza with will be a signature art piece. And then to the north, there's a sculpture garden that runs all along the edge of between Douglas and the event lawn. In the southwest corner is the canopies area. It's a series of shade structures with seating and movable furniture to accommodate sort of larger gatherings as opposed to some of the maybe smaller, more intimate zones in the sculpture garden and elsewhere for where 2 to 4 people. This is where you might grow with a larger group and for lunch or just a day in the park. Item 5 here, this is the Arches Playground. It's adjacent, shares a wet wall with the children's restroom. So there's family restrooms on the kind of playground side. So you don't have to leave the playground to pack up the kids in the stroller and all your other gear to take the kids to the restroom. And then it's park accessible restrooms for just the wider park users on the east, open to the park at large. There's a plaza behind the performance pavilion, which is kind of envisioned as a green room or a kind of a smaller, more intimate venue. We're preserving the existing Arches monument that's been in place since the park was built. We're reinforcing that to make a strong pedestrian connection, that goes all the way connecting the Capitol District to the Old Market to the south. Once you get past 11th Street, then you start to see some of that impact of the grade change. Really, there's a little bit of a flat zone where we have this community swings, you'll see in renderings, and then the grade transition begins down. You can see some steps down as you kind of come along this edge. We've preserved the existing downtown slides in place and then reinforced that with even more sliding play attractions. And then to the north, there's a cascade water feature, which is a multi-tiered water feature that that takes you to the edge of a reconstructed pond and boat cove. And then the cove is a series of amphitheater seating along the outer edge. And then there's this kind of plinth that takes you into Mecca's offices here in the ground floor of the greenhouse, the basement level, which faces interior to the park. A series of overlooks along the streetscape that like take in kind of grand views of the pond and the cove and just the park action, watch the world go by. And then on the east side, there's the 8th Street Green, which is kind of a smaller lawn with a smaller pavilion. There's a series of dog parks, a small dog park and a large dog park here on that kind of northeastern corner. And then there's a quieter grove space here in the southern edge that is sort of a flexible kind of lawn with some gathering spaces around it. We were fortunate to come in just from an access point. There were a number of existing ADA parking stalls located around the site. We preserved those in place and made sure that the curbs, curb cuts, and so forth were accounted for. We've renovated everything basically inside the curbs, the entire project, really with the focus of trying to keep as much level access considering how much grade change is happening. All the slopes are generally, we try to go above and beyond what's required in the ADA. So everything is, except where mandated by slopes, it's all under 5% lateral, 2% cross slope, trying to keep that really as soft as we can so that it's very easy to navigate your way throughout the park. There are a couple of key locations where we start to make those grade transitions. You can see there's a ramp that brings you down to the lower pond level. Again, that's a 22-foot transition, so it's a pretty long ramp. We do offer a break here in this accessway that gets you to this upper level of the cascade so that folks can access that from both the lower level and the top if you're mobility impaired. You'll see, I think, in a little bit what that cascade feature is like. Similarly, there's a series, particularly around the Burlington and the greenhouse buildings. Access is a little tricky because of the finished floor elevations of the building. So there's a series of ramps that this ramp on the west of the Burlington takes you down to the Burlington level. And then you navigate another ramp down to the lower level, the bottom of the slides. And then there's a series of other paths that take you up to get into this access on the north side of the Burlington. Similarly, at the greenhouse apartments, there's a ramp that takes you up to this upper level. And then if you're not familiar with the area, there's a breezeway between the greenhouse and the parking garage. There's an existing ramp that comes down that takes you to the entry level of the greenhouse. We've also introduced another ramp that will now help you navigate down from the level of the greenhouse into the park level. You can see also there's a ramp here. If you're familiar with Douglas Street in this area, Douglas Street is extremely, extremely steep. So basically, we couldn't provide an accessible route along this edge. So we actually divert park visitors along the streetscape into the park proper, take them out to this crosswalk, which gets them into Heartland of America. There's another series of others, some steps and things here on the eastern end, but we managed to navigate that with this central promenade that leads all the way to the park throughout the limits. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the individual renderings. I know we'll be a little pressed for time. I would encourage you, please don't be shy. If you want to interrupt me to ask me a question, you will certainly not hurt my feelings. This is a view from the center of the lawn, the downtown green, excuse me, looking at the performance pavilion. The performance pavilion is an elevated stage, but you can see in these areas, there's actually kind of access around to the back that gets you onto the plaza that then takes you onto the stage. And then really lots of broad open pathways, plenty of room for circulation and access. And again, we tried to keep slopes as gentle as possible so that it's welcoming for everyone. The sculpture garden is a mixture of concrete and crushed stone paving. It features some movable furniture like these Adirondack chairs here, fire features, and then there'll be a rotating exhibit of sculpture. The park, you can see there's some kind of notions of light poles throughout these renderings. The park will be fully illuminated and safe at night with a number of scenes that Mecca control to change for events and kind of overall activation and programming. The children's garden in particular is a little hard to understand in the plan, so let me just try to communicate how we've organized it. It's very, we've been very focused on accessibility. It's basically a 3-level play area. So you'll walk in at the front. There's a series of slides that take you down to a lower level. These slides have transfer platforms for children that might be mobility impaired, so they can participate in some of that action. You also can circulate from this entry. There's a long accessible route that takes you past the seating in the front into the lower level and all the way down to the front to the bottom of these steps. We've linked this entire play area with an accessible route. There's a kind of a cove area underneath here that we're calling the rope forest. It offers a variety of enclosures, so kids that are that might have some different sensory needs, they can get away from the kind of the hustle and bustle and into a kind of a more quiet enclosed space. There's also a series of ropes and seating opportunities that kids can use for to move around and play. You can also see there's this kind of deck, folding deck structure. So there's a path that links through this. The deck is also kind of a play surface in and of itself. And then the third level is these kind of arches overhead. They're custom play structures. They do include some access and transfer attractions. There's a climbing wall back here in the corner. Whoops, wrong direction. And you can see just the hint right here. This is the family restroom side of the restroom building. All the restrooms are family size that access the children's restroom. They're oversized and I think they're all about 10 by 10. It could be off on the precise measurements there, but they are all, they exceed what's required for ADA stalls. We've woven kind of these access concerns throughout the playground. This is the other side, so you can get a sense. Here's that entry arch and the gate. You wind your way around this path to come down. That accessible route takes you down the front, underneath here, and to the bottom of the slides. We can just get a hint of those steps down here. We've even tried to bake some kind of interaction for even if kids can't participate, say, in the use of the arches. The experience of going through the playground does connect them to the children that might be playing or utilizing those space, so there's some interaction between those elements. Oops. The next slide. Computer cooperates. This is the downtown slides. You can see we've preserved the existing slides in place, but we've added some additional slides. There's a stair here, but just beyond this view, there's the series of ramps that take you down to that lower level. We've paid a lot of attention to materials and how those are used. In the playground, you saw probably some artificial turf. I'll just jump back really quickly. Let's see, too far. You can see this is artificial turf here. That's all ADA compliant surfacing. We've also done a similar thing. This is a fiber mulch. It's with maintenance. It's also ADA compliant for access. You can see there's also some transfer platforms at the top of these slides so that kids that are mobility impaired can use those from top to bottom. I think these images don't speak to it specifically. We've also worked pretty extensively to integrate companion seating throughout the entire project. So in any gathering area, even if it's not one met by code, there's usually some places set aside for wheelchairs or other mobility devices to sit in line with these other seating elements. I think you'll see those. I'll try to point those out again as we work through the renderings. This is the 11th Street promenades that's looking at the arch. So this is the old market to the south. We've sort of brought the orange poles that you might know back to life. They come through in a couple of different areas, including this catenary system overhead. This is the community swings, which is just west of the downtown slides. You can get a sense this is now looking west. The slides feature both kind of more conventional porch swings, also with a backless swing here so that folks can sit and just kind of watch the park action. Looking here, this is from the 10th Street Bridge looking east over the pond and cove. So the accessible route goes around this pond and cove. It's very generous. There's lots of room to circulate and then continue on to parts east and Heartland of America. We've got some fixed seating elements here and there. You can see these are a little deeper, but there's opportunities for companion seating on either end. So that extra room for the benches really helps accommodate those wheelchair placements. That includes the ends of these other fixed elements as well. You can't quite make it out, but this is the entry to one of the ramps that takes you up to the level. This is the greenhouse, so the ramp that takes you up to the greenhouse entry here, and then you can just vaguely make out that parking garage ramp over here. So that's access to this side of the park. And then finally, on the east end of Jean Leahy Mall, this is the dog park. So there's actually what we like to affectionately term an airlock. that controls access between the two dog parks. Again, this is hard concrete paving inside the airlock and along the paths. And then you've got crushed DG here in the courtyards with plenty of room for access and circulation on that material. You can also see just this performance pavilion in the back, the lawn beyond. So this is where we were when the project started. Again, very circuitous in terms of access, lots of stairs, lots of barriers. This is as of this morning. So this is, you can see the west side here has been filled in, fairly flat, pretty level. Our central lawn, some of these elements in the playground. This is that kind of canopies area. I didn't mention it explicitly, but the canopies area includes some crushed stone paving, but there's also a series of ADA tables set on hard concrete. So there's no concerns about trying to navigate that in inclement weather. We also have picnic tables with ADA compliant seating integrated and distributed throughout the site. So generally in any kind of cluster of areas where there's picnic tables, there's at least one that is able for folks that are in mobility devices to pull up aside to. I'll try to cover, Heartland America is a little bit bigger, but a little simpler, not quite as much packed into that design. There's a central plaza that lands at the termination of that promenade that comes in from Jean Leahy Mall. There's a skate kiosk, which is kind of restrooms and retail space to support the skate ribbon, which you see here is item number 3. That's kind of roller skates and scooters in the summertime and ice skating in the winter. There's a small structure down here at the end, which is sort of the Zamboni parking and the infrastructure for the rink itself. There's a picnic terrace on the north end, which is similar kind of in composition to the sculpture garden, but has bocce courts and more kind of family picnic oriented things like grills and other seating elements. A large event lawn here, and this is where we imagine things would go for like the 4th of July fireworks or New Year's Eve, as opposed to kind of the smaller and more event focused lawn at Jean Leahy Mall. We're keeping this existing pedestrian bridge connection to the north, which goes on to Lewis and Clark Landing. We're also terminating this long promenade of the Farnham Pier with an elevated structure. This pier does include, you can just quite make out, they look probably just like a little blurry on your screen, but there's a series of ramps that take anyone who's mobility impaired. There's ramps and landings that take them up to the top of the stairs, so they can, the top of the ramp, excuse me, so they can avoid the stairs up and they can get out in this river overlook just like everyone else. On the south end, we've got an amphitheater, which is a series of terrace seating with accommodations for companion seating, and both at the top and the bottom. There's a series of overlooks in the park. Because of the level changes, there's hard paving out to this first overlook, and there's access to the bottom. There's a small lawn overlooking the lake. There's a pier here we're trying to bring back, hopefully the boat operations that everyone knows and loves in Heartland of America Lake. And then there's a series of promenades that take you back. Again, we're trying to navigate grade here. There's about 20 feet between this upper promenade and the lower water level. So there's a series of sloping paths and ramps that come up and down. There's a playground over here, which is, again, kind of similar accommodations for transfer and kids of all abilities in this area, as well as accommodations for companion seating and ADA accommodations at the picnic tables. And then this path connects here. There's a lower path that falls on this outer edge of Heartland of America, and that takes you all the way down to a crossing if you don't want to use the pedestrian bridge to get to Lewis and Clark Landing to the north. This is a very broad overview, but you can start to see this is the promenade that extends. You can start to make out this amphitheater here as it climbs up here. That's where the ramps and the handrails are to get you to the top of the pier, which takes you out to look over the river. You can begin to make out how we're navigating grade here. This is that lower path here with a series of connecting paths that take you down lower so that folks can navigate that easily if they can't make it down the stairs. And then the same kind of accommodations and seating areas and gathering areas where we try to bake companion seating and other kinds of accommodations into gathering areas wherever we were able to. Paving, I should say, as well as hard paving in both concrete and flagstone around the seating areas. This is that promenade, the Farnham Promenade that connects you all the way down to the pier at the end. There's a series of fixed seating, but other areas where to see that relationship to the skate ribbon on the left. And then this is on the other side of the skate ribbon. This is the main approach here. That's Heartland of America Beyond. Get a sense of the skate ribbon and how that works and how connected that is to the park. And this is looking from the other direction into that skate ribbon. And then you can actually see, this is probably one of the better renderings to show some of these accommodations. This is the amphitheater around the lake. You can see in this kind of upper level here, we break these benches in a number of locations so that they can accommodate companion seating throughout these gathering spaces. This is Heartland of America. Gosh, this is going to be, let's see, I think we have it, yeah, August of 19. And then here's from this morning. The camera view has changed a little bit, but you can see we've substantially filled in here with the kind of the same goal of making that level and easy to access. But you can start to see how this lake edge on below is starting to take shape. There's that pedestrian bridge connection to Lewis and Clark Landing. And then out on this kind of southeastern finger here, this is where that children's playground is and the ultimate connection to the ConAgra campus. Lewis and Clark Landing, this is right here. You can see this is the pedestrian bridge connection over. Riverfront Drive has been extended and now connects, Douglas Street, the Douglas Street extension now connects to Riverfront Drive. The existing crossing Riverfront Drive has been closed, but that's making room for a parking lot that serves this new destination children's playground, a plaza that's shared by this playground and the Kiewit Luminarium. That plaza leads you to a promenade edge and an urban beach. So we've added on a series of structures to help you navigate your way down from the upper level of the terrace through the urban beach all the way down. And we've actually, through our work with the ADA consultant, I know there's some questions about that work. Part of what she helped us do is make sure that we were providing equitable access throughout all three of the parks, and that we were meeting the code requirements on things like reach ranges and clearances, tolerances, companion seating, things of that nature. Once you get on the east side of the Luminarium, this is a large public plaza. There's a series of planters along this outer edge that protect and kind of focus energy towards a small lawn that caps off a sand volleyball area. This area is raised, but includes a series of ramps that get you up from the plaza level. And then Mecca will also have a series of ADA beach mats that will provide access into the sand for folks that have mobility impairments. You can see there's a series of bleachers that look out over the sand volleyball court. Those bleachers also have companion seating both at the top and the bottom of each run of seating. And then back in this area, this parking lot is actually controlled right here. This one to the north of the Luminarium is for Luminarium staff parking, but these parking areas that are existing remain to serve the Luminarium itself, and all their accommodations for ADA parking have been left in place. There's some minor renovations happening to the MLK Bridge. And then there's some other kind of back of house improvements being made to the city maintenance facility to support Mecca's ongoing operations. You can get a sense of, this is just sort of one emblematic image from the playground in Lewis and Clark Landing. It features a variety of custom play structures. They all do have transfer stations at the bottom that allow kids to, and mobility devices to use those structures. There's also accessible routes that take you up into the base of all these structures. And then even some of the water play elements, which have been configured so that there's water play elements that are accessible at both the top and the bottom runs by kids. This is just a quick view of the urban beach from the plaza in front of the Luminarium. You can see this kind of ramp structure here. There's actually someone in a wheelchair here navigating their way down to the lower level of the beach. And the beach is a mixture of kind of canopy structures, planters, and then flexible furniture opportunities for folks who just want to bring a blanket and a chair and enjoy watching the river go by. Finally, this volleyball area. This area is, again, all the way at the very far north end. You can see these kind of overlook steps here for this gallery seating. And again, those have both accommodations for companions at top and bottom. There are also some concrete islands and kind of seating elements that ring this area. And so you can navigate up to the ramps and participate in watching the activities from those edges, or have the mats taken out and come out onto the sand itself. And then this was Lewis and Clark Landing as of October of 2020. You can see here the major noticeable principal update is the addition of a luminarium, but slowly but surely the park is starting to take place out here. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has about, I know this is a lot of information to take in. I'm sure that there's some questions about how we've tried to think about access for all.
Well, Nathan, I kind of missed it. Can you start over and, no, I'm kidding. That was a lot of information. Questions from commission members?
Well, I'll take a stab at starting, and I'll just give a little kind of like disclaimer, apology for level of detail. About 60% of my work is in architectural consulting around universal design, so I may pick on some details that are different in person than the renderings, and just let us know that.
Sure.
One of my questions around the restrooms that are up by the park, the children's in Jean Leahy Mall. I'm going back to the first park. You mentioned that they're family-style restrooms accessible from the playground side. Are there any companion-style single stall that are accessed from the other side, the park side? You said that there was another
Yes.
bank.
Yes, absolutely. Both sides, both the public, because we're required by code, so the park accessible restrooms on the east side, those include ADA stalls. The restrooms all meet ADA criteria for clearances, offsets, all the sinks, the hand dryers, everything meets code. And then there are 4 family style restrooms on the west side, and those are purely for people that are inside the playground.
Are there any of those single stall, not ADA compliant stalls, like within a bank of, like a bank of multi-stall restrooms? Like, is there single stall, family style, companion style on that east side bank?
There is not.
And so the only reason I ask, and like I said, don't mean to pick on you all, but families with children aren't the only ones that can benefit and use and need restrooms where there's the ability for assistance. Or where there's greater space or privacy due to cultural needs or whatnot. So is there another space in the park where they can access a private restroom?
Yeah, there are restrooms inside the MECA's offices when those are open. And then Heartland of America does have a family restroom that is accessed from the park. It's not contained within anything else. So there is a larger kind of family size restroom in HOA that's in part of that Western skate kiosk building.
And Heartland, that's the middle one, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then with the slides, and this may be easier to, if you are able to pull up the rendering of like where the slides are, the original, yeah. So just because the edges are cut off. So if a child who's using a mobility device is going down the slide and the parent needs to get their device down, or the parent uses a mobility device, where is the path for them to get down to the bottom?
Let me go to the plan, because the plan's pretty scaled out, but let me see what I can do to kind of help you understand. Whoops. So, not select that. So the top of the slides are here, the bottom of the slides down here.
Okay.
So the access, if you're starting here, you go out to the street and there's a ramp that takes you down here and the ramp goes down to here. So through these 2 connections, it gets you down to the lower level.
Okay, and is there, from the north side, is there a path, or it's on the south side?
From the north side, there's a, not explicitly, there's an artificial turf slope that goes down, which could be navigated, but I think it's going to be right on the edge of what would be considered accessible from a slope perspective. But to get down in the slide area, you have to go on this southern edge.
Okay, thank you.
There is this ramp access on the north side over here, but that's much, much further away than the one on the south.
A little bit, just a little. And then on the boat cove, on that crossing over the water, are there any railings or barriers? I'm thinking kids, I'm thinking people with vision impairments and perception walking over and not having any guard. Yeah, on that right there.
Yeah, no, there are no, and there's actually a rendering of that. Let me go to that. There is not a barrier or a rail. We do provide a route along the way. Let me get to the rendering. There is an alternative route along the edge for someone who just can't navigate it. But the pond does include extensive safety shelves. So there's a 3-foot shelf that's about 6 inches underneath the water. And that's on the pond side. That's actually around the entirety of the pond itself. So if you stepped off the edge of the walking surface, there's a safety shelf there, and then there's a gradual slope that goes down to the bottom of the pond. And then the depth of the boat cove itself is just 18 inches. So there is not kind of a deeper section here where we anticipate a lot of kind of the kids and family activity will be organized.
Okay.
I just wanted to add on to that. That's another thing I was going to point out as well. I happen to know quite a few people who use power chairs or wheelchairs with some sort of power assistance that sometimes there's different incidents where those chairs take off out of nowhere and the person goes face first into, whatever. And even with the safety, the shelves under where you said it's only like 3 feet deep, I could envision that particular scenario being a potential danger. It, Now, of course, hopefully, if someone has that sort of risk, maybe they would take an alternative route. But I do see that as a potential hazard.
Sure. I didn't mention it, but there's also some bioretention basins on the backside. So we do have some curbs on the backside here because there is a little bit of a drop around the edge. But we will have some tactile warnings along the edge for kind of cane detection, but we don't have a barrier on the pond side.
Okay. So when you say tactile, like the same type of strips that are at curb cuts, or is it a different textured concrete? Kind of what did you guys decide on?
It's a socket joint. But we are not using all the crosswalks. So anywhere where you transition from a vehicle to a pedestrian edge, those will have ADA tiles. But we have just kind of tactile detection elsewhere in the park as we mark level changes or things like that.
I guess, given the breadth of the park, I'm just wondering, how we're going to ensure that folks who need adapted restrooms are going to know where they are and can get to them easily. I get concerned that the distances sometimes will be challenging. So can you speak to that a little bit, Nathan?
Sure. I didn't touch on it at all, but the park does. There are maps and directory signs located throughout the park that are high contrast for folks that are vision impaired, and those will help people navigate. There are also, this isn't really related to the restrooms, but there is signage directing folks to accessible routes. So periodically, if you're at a feature, there's a sign that shows you that, if you're mobility impaired, you go this way to the ramp that gets you down to the lower level.
Great.
I'll also couple with that we'll have park ambassadors in the park helping guide people and direct them and answer any questions that they need. This is a huge space and a lot of ground to cover. And, I think we've all experienced that the one thing you need is not the closest thing to you either. So, trying to help assist people as much as they can while visiting the park as well.
I know your time is short. Other questions?
Not any pressing ones.
What's that?
As
Not any
Christina
pressing ones.
notated, if you think of anything after the fact, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you have any individual concerns, we'd love to, continue the conversation and answer anything as much as we can.
Well, we really appreciate you coming and talking to us. And I can tell you, just sitting here, it looks really impressive.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess one of the things and we're dealing with this in some other circumstances, one thing that I anticipate, and it's just a possibility, is that we might be hearing from some of our constituents who are starting to use the park this summer and then run into problems. Will we come back to you, Christina and Kate, to see what we would need to do to kind of rectify a circumstance in terms of
Yes.
accessibility?
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Absolutely. And we try to put our contact information out there as much as possible, all of our website, our social media, but absolutely, if you have somebody who needs to get directly in contact with someone, you should feel more than welcome to share my direct email address. Or I can provide a phone number too. We're happy to be as available and as transparent as you guys need.
That's outstanding. We really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And we have cats, so we can get a hold of anybody. Go ahead. Anyway, were you going to say something, Rachel? I'm sorry.
I know that Nathan said he has to go right at 4:15, so I just want to say, even though it's our duty here to be nitpicky somewhat, right? But thank you all so much for the effort you put into sharing this information with us.
Absolutely, we appreciate your time.
Thanks
Yeah.
for the
Thank you
invitation.
so much.
There's always so much to think about. We really think we got a lot of it right, and I hope that that proves out. Hope to see everybody at the opening in July.
Very good.
Wonderful. Thank
Very
you.
good.
Thanks very much, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thanks,
Thank
all.
you, guys.
I don't know. I'm actually shocked that it's going to, if it does open in July, like, there's a lot to do down there still.
Yeah, it doesn't look close to opening in July at all.
I was gonna ask him, I didn't end up having time on when what the timeline is, so people would know on
It's like that Eugene Leahy, I can see, because I think they have to just.
They started there, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just, our whole building would shake, with bringing in all the trucks of dirt and everything, and then compressing it. And then, but thank you, because I was gonna mention the boat cove, but also I'm still really concerned about the number of restrooms.
Sorry, I can't really hear Nancy.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot to put my mic on. You're not hearing. You're not losing your hearing, Rachel. But I said, the two thoughts that I had were the boat cove, and Megan brought that up. But I still am concerned about the number of restrooms. And when you have that big of a distance, and when you look at the number of restrooms that they're offering, and then to have to travel those distances, that was a real concern when they came the first time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing that's still very evident is that there's just so much education and work that needs to be done around the fact that, like, accessibility doesn't come from strictly following code, and everything they mentioned with, like, ADA this was all if you're using a wheelchair mobility device, not any of those other situations where
Right.
it's the parent that's using the mobility device, or the difference in vision ability and perceptions, and it's just really hard to sit here where it's like, we did this and it's ADA compliant this, and the restroom component just grates on me because of the fact that they assume that families with kids are the only ones who need a single stall family restroom, and I don't know how else to present that information.
I was confused. Every time he was saying there are restrooms and then like family style is the phrase I kept hearing. Is he referring to like a single stall, large room with a changing table, a urinal, a toilet? Because that's what I picture. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yes, but those are only accessible from the playground side. Wow. He said at the Heartland of America Park, there's one of those like companion single stall type of restrooms, but that's on like whatever.
That's all the way east off of 10th Street.
Yeah, and then up at 14th or 13th Street is the other one. But when he was saying there were ADA stalls, he just means that within a bank of restrooms, like if you go into a restroom, that there's an ADA stall.
Right, and that's not accessible for so many people. That's not
right. Well, but even culturally, you have certain cultures where like being in restrooms with other people, they need that separation, and so I don't know. Restrooms are a big push button point for me.
Well, I think
it's for everybody. Yeah.
I think that there's a difference when you're talking about code and ADA and what is in reality what people experience,
like
and
actual equitable use.
Right.
Also, I think it's really silly. They're just not going to have a border on
The boat.
what you brought up,
No,
Megan.
It's just like, oh, well, it's just a little bit deep, so you're just gonna
Right.
you're just gonna get wet. That
So
You just fall into the water. No
Well-
big deal. Like, what? Oh no.
So if somebody happens to not have a really good arc with their cane, I can see them. I can see this
Yeah.
going. But also, if you, like you said, the situation with a scooter or a power wheelchair or something, if it launches, it's going to just tilt you. I mean, as soon as you start losing that, you will fall.
I'm thinking of someone like, if someone is quadriplegic and goes over the edge into that little 3-foot shelf is not gonna be all that helpful. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
but
gonna
it's
be a
not
mess.
water drowning if you're face foot down with a wheelchair on top of you.
well, or even like you're walking across with your kids, and one of it, you can drown in 6 inches of water. Like
Right.
I just want to say, we have my aunt has polio and is in a wheelchair. And just this last December, it coming off the ramp, it came off wrong. It launched and it flipped over on my aunt. It crushed both of her legs. And
Oh my God.
she is still in Brookstone working on coming home. So these aren't concerns that are far reaching.
Well, they're
These
not-
are real
they're not
concerns.
These are not nitpickies. These are actual, like,
Yeah.
right, we raised, besides the restroom issue, we raised the barriers around the water in our last meeting as well.
we did.
We did. Yes, we did. And it was the same answer. It's just like, oh well, there are other places that are accessible.
Right, you can
Like,
take
know,
you can take the other path. And then the situation with the slides, I didn't say anything after my follow-up and he showed the path, but like
That looked like a big,
if my kid's
Loop
going down
around.
the slide, I'm not gonna leave a public park to go up to the sidewalk and then walk down around the building to try to.
come all the way, it looked like a big loop my child's going down the slide and they're down in probably 5 seconds. And I'm taking
Right.
a minute and a half to get around to get them.
Hope no
It
one
just
takes your kid in the meantime. That's
didn't-
what I'm.
Right?
That's exactly what I thought when he was talking.
doesn't run off like mine.
Well, yeah.
Well,
down the
any child could do that. They could be really excited.
Yeah.
I could just see. Yeah, I had all these things envisioned during the presentation.
So,
Some things I just had to write down so I didn't say them out loud.
I do think.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have questions even about like how accessible is that little beach area? Can people with limited mobility get all the way? Are there things in place where people could actually get close to it, or are they going to be yards and yards away? But it wasn't even worth asking that question when there are actual like hazards that they still seem to have in place, and bathroom issues.
Yeah.
But
I just want to say Stephanie picked a bad day to be gone. I can't even tell you what taking notes.
No, I don't think that you. I think there's. Some of our concerns would probably be the most important thing to
Right.
as to have. Now that she says, "Oh, fine."
Now that
she
I've written
says that.
everything.
now that I've been typing for an hour.
I have like 5 pages.
Oh my goodness.
It's a good thing you're a fast typer. I heard her over here.
Like you just need the highlights.
But is it something that we should still send a note about our?
Oh, Keith is
concerns?
raising his hand, or it looks like. Is that what that is?
Go ahead, Keith.
Hi, everyone. Yes, just a quick comment.
Sure. Thank you.
I appreciate the feedback, and ironically, I met with this team recently, a representative from this team recently, and we talked about all the great things about the park. But you all's feedback is critical, and so as you are already discussing, I would just advise you to roll it up and let's get it submitted to that group so that they can be mindful of this feedback. I mean, this is the most appropriate and qualified body to give this feedback, to the park team, and OJB is a great company, world class, and they would love to hear this kind of input to see what we can do to plan backwards to where we are today to make sure they implement some of these thoughts and concerns that perhaps maybe might get addressed down the line or maybe might not. So I know y'all are planning to do that, but I was just all the things that you're thinking and all the feedback you have. Let's share it and see
Well,
if
I-
they left the door open for reactive responses, but I
Yeah.
think we need to be earlier than that in terms of getting some of these things in front of them. Because these are things we met with them, gosh.
It had to have been 2 years ago because they were in
Yeah,
person.
it was almost 2 years ago. I think it was just a little less than 2 years, but I mean, close.
They had just started.
And we raised some issues based on the renderings we were shown, and they're all the same. And didn't really want to raise that to them because we were appreciative of their time and willingness to talk with us. But on the other side of the coin, we didn't really see anybody respond to concerns we brought up before.
Yeah, our specific feedback.
Would you agree?
Because yeah, it's unfortunate when you see how much work they have put into this for sure, and you don't want to seem, like ungrateful or like we're overlooking all the great things that they have done right. But still communicating the point that there's a difference between something that like meets ADA standards or exceeds ADA standards in one area, but still falls short of being universally accessible.
Well, yeah,
You know?
the hope is that not that everything is code. The hope is
Right.
that it's thoughtful, and maybe it goes past code sometimes when, when the ability of people to enjoy the park might be
It's for
otherwise
it to be
minimized.
functional and usable for everybody.
Exactly.
And so.
Right, and that's what universal accessibility is. Yeah.
And that oftentimes means you have to think outside the box and go beyond just code.
Right.
And because I think, when I was looking at that boat cove and processing, there could be some very aesthetically pleasing rails, that could go through there that just provides a safety feature for people and that. And I just have to say, I've been doing my job a long time, and I would guess, other than adults who have some onset of vision, the largest group is over 55 with macular degeneration. But those that are younger, most of those individuals, probably 85% of them have secondary disabilities to blindness. And so, there's a lot of considerations, and, that's, and it goes to the other point that Megan was making. We're talking about disability, but let's talk about culturally. Don't we want to be not just inclusive, but fully diverse, looking at our diversity as a city?
Recognizing, diversity, equity, and inclusion as a core principle in terms of what we would like to see happening with any city project, much less something of this scale. Yeah, I agree.
I had forgotten about the Kiewit Luminarium. Forgot about that.
Keith, with Mark's comments of equity, diversity, and inclusion being so important and the cultural concerns, has your other commission, the one that we will have a representative sitting on, have they been included in these talks with Mecca, and have they been able to grant areas of concerns?
The Human Rights and Relations Board.
No, not to this point. The Community D&I Board has not been involved in discussions on this topic in particular. I think that I appreciate, I'm glad that it was said in the presence of the presentation that how do we go beyond compliance and ingrain into, how we want to do business and engage the community, thoughtful, safe and accessible, accoutrements in the park. I like that sort of as this iterative process that we're trying to help developers in our community, really realize. I think that's sort of the point we need to emphasize. But at least to your question, we haven't had that group address this. We felt like this group is more suitable to address that, but I think we should all sort of bang this drum and how do we go and to what extent do we go beyond just compliance, go to having like Rachel said, a universally accessible park. I think that's sort of the undercurrent of how we should do business in all places. But this project in particular and the ones moving forward, I think that's what we ought to emphasize.
At this juncture, it's like if not now, when, would be the question I would ask. It's like, with something of this scale, and with this impact, the impact it's gonna have on the city, it's like, why wouldn't we wanna ensure that and not just do the minimum? So,
Yeah.
um,
I don't want to speak out of turn, but there's still a long ways to go, and that's why my suggestion would be to let's take this connection that's been, I would say initiated, but this group has already talked to the group, but let's reinitiate the conversation about what we can do moving forward to make sure that the park is as accessible as possible. We're not too far down the road that they can't take into consideration the things that this group says, and I think we should try to do that. Again, I can't speak for the developers. I can't speak for any of the funding for it, but as they mentioned, I think that the feedback and the where do we go from here, Mark, that sort of way of thinking is valuable still yet at this point, even as far down the road as we are. I think it's still possible.
Well, one of the things I find that any time that we're working with a business, we talk about them up front that we need to look at accessibility, because once you start getting into a project or into the development, it's really hard midway or towards the end to just change, all of those types of plans. And so that's why we were really anxious to talk to them early on about this whole process. So all these things would be considered as they were doing the actual development.
Okay, before we move on, I'm okay with the discussion going on, but we need to end our meeting, technically speaking. Our next meeting is scheduled for April 25th. I want to thank Jamie, our sign interpreter, and Cox Communications, or whoever is recording us. And we will meet on April 25th, and I'm going to adjourn us for now, but I'd like to keep the link open so we can kind of finish up this conversation.
Will we lose Rachel?